Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to our seminar, Forging Smart Partnerships for the SDGs. This is the second time that we hold such a seminar. As the audience are taking their seats, the best thing that we could start, خير ما نبدأ به آية من الذكر الحكيم يتلوها علينا الشيخ عبد الله الملهي. تفضل. عبد الواحد الملهي، كلنا عباد الواحد يا سيدي، تفضل.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وعلى الله قصد السبيل ومنها جائر ولو شاء لهداكم أجمعين. هو الذي أنزل من السماء ماء لكم منه شراب ومنه شجر فيه تسيمون ينبت لكم به الزرع والزيتون والنخيل والأعناب ومن كل الثمرات إن في ذلك لآية لقوم يتفكرون. وسخر لكم الليل والنهار والشمس والقمر والنجوم مسخرات بأمره إن في ذلك لآيات لقوم يعقلون. وما ذرأ لكم في الأرض مختلفا ألوانه إن في ذلك لآية لقوم يذكرون. صدق الله العظيم.
صدق الله العظيم. One more time, welcome to this seminar on forging smart partnerships. In the past, dumping money at development issues, we thought it will solve it. The collective wisdom of the development community for the past 70 years has reached the conclusion that without the partnership, we can even make the progress. As a matter of fact, we could reverse the development gains that we could make without the partnerships. And the collective wisdom of the development community came up with the SDGs. And SDG 17 basically is all about partnerships. And we have assembled a great panel for you today as we realize that without the governments, we cannot achieve the SDGs. Without the finance, we cannot achieve the SDGs. Without the political will, we cannot achieve the SDGs. Without the engagement of multi-stakeholders, we cannot achieve the SDGs. The parliamentarians, the private sector, the NGOs. Without finance, we cannot make progress. Without STI, we cannot make progress. Without the youth involvement, we cannot make progress. Without the parliamentarians' oversight, we cannot make progress. The bottom line is without the partnership, we really cannot make any progress in improving human conditions. But the question is, how can we make these partnerships smarter, more effective? Are we giving lip service to the partnership? Or are we really having real partnership that will advance the cause of development? I will introduce the panel in a few minutes, but before this, and despite his intense schedule, His Excellency the President, Dr. Bandar Hajjar, we'd like to invite him to the podium to give his welcoming remarks. So please help me welcome him to the podium.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. أصحاب المعالي محافظي مجموعة البنك الإسلامي للتنمية، أصحاب المعالي الوزراء، ضيوفنا الكرام، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. اسمحوا لي في البداية أن أعبر لكم عن أسمى عبارات الشكر والامتنان لقبولكم دعوتنا وتشريفنا في ندوة تعزيز الشراكة الذكية المتعددة الأطراف من أجل التنمية المستدامة. وأعبر لكم عن سروري واعتزازي بافتتاح هذه الندوة الهامة التي ستناقش واحدة من أبرز القضايا التي تضمنتها رزنامة الاجتماع 43 لمجموعة البنك الإسلامي للتنمية، والتي أردناها أن تكون منصة للحوار وتبادل الأفكار والتجارب حول قضايا التنمية المستدامة في دولنا الأعضاء. السيدات والسادة، إن تركيز الندوة في هذا العام كما هو الشأن لبقية الفعاليات على الشراكات المتعددة الأطراف نابع من إيماننا بضرورة العمل الجماعي لتحقيق تنمية مستدامة والمساهمة في رسم مستقبل أفضل لمواطني دولنا الأعضاء. ولقد أثبتت التجارب خلال الحقبة الماضية بأن الشراكات متعددة الأطراف لعبت دوراً محورياً في تنفيذ برامج وخطط التنمية على المستوى القطري والدولي، حيث أنتجت الشراكة بين القطاع العام والخاص والمجتمع المدني تجارب ناجحة في العديد من المجالات التنموية، وخاصة في مجال الصحة والتعليم. وأثمر التعاون بين الحكومات والقطاع الخاص والمنظمات غير الحكومية عن تحسين جودة الحياة لملايين الناس في شتى أرجاء العالم. إلا أن الطريق لا يزال أمامنا طويل لتحقيق كل أهدافنا التنموية. في حين كان اعتماد نجاح جهود التنمية في الماضي إلى حد كبير على توفر الموارد المالية والإرادة السياسية، فإن تحقيق أهداف التنمية المستدامة سيعتمد في المستقبل على قدرة مختلف الشركاء على العمل بروح جديدة وبفكر جديد يعتمد على معطيات الاقتصاد المعاصر الذي يحقق الربح لكل الأطراف. السيدات والسادة، إن حجم وطموح جدول أعمال التنمية ل 2030 يتطلب إرساء شراكات ذكية وعمل جماعي على جميع المستويات، إذ لا يمكن لأي بلد أو قطاع أو شريحة من المجتمع تحقيق أهداف التنمية المستدامة بشكل منفرد. وفي هذا السياق سيسعى البنك الإسلامي للتنمية خلال السنوات القادمة إن شاء الله إلى إحداث تغير نوعي لدوره في التنمية، بحيث يتحول تدريجياً إلى بنك للتنمية والإنمائيين تتاح فيه الفرصة لكل المعنيين بأنشطته التنموية لعرض الاحتياجات وتصميم الحلول وحشد الموارد وتنفيذ المشاريع وتقييم أثرها. ويعتزم البنك بناء شراكات استراتيجية من خلال منصات عالمية ميدانية وافتراضية تسمح بالعمل الجماعي الذي يحشد موارد الجمهور في جميع مراحل العملية التنموية. السيدات والسادة، يسعدني أن تتيح هذه الندوة الفرصة للحكومات والمنظمات الدولية والقطاع الخاص والمجتمع المدني للتشاور بشأن أنجع سبل للعمل معاً من أجل التنمية المستدامة، من أجل تنمية أكثر استدامة وأكثر شمولية وأقرب إلى تلمس احتياجات المواطنين للحياة الكريمة التي ينشدونها. إننا نتطلع بكل اهتمام إلى ما سينتج عن اجتماعكم هذا، ونؤكد على التزامنا بترجمة توصياتكم إلى برامج وخطط فعالة تخدم أجيال أمتنا المتعطشة لمستقبل أكثر إنتاجية ومشاركة ووطنية. وفقكم الله إلى كل ما فيه خير أمتنا ومستقبل أجيالنا، والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Thank you, Mr. President, for your welcoming remarks. And thank you for your commitment to the SDGs. As a matter of fact, I'd like to share with you, in IDB, we have a community of practice for the SDGs to raise awareness about the SDGs. We have our newsletter, and we divided the SDGs, each one separately. We were giving people separate SDGs. So people will pick SDG 2, people will pick SDG 5. So the president said 5, of course. People will have SDG 7, 8, all the same. And the president, on his way out from the room, he said, send me all 17 of them to my office. So thank you very much for your commitment to the SDGs, and we hope that IDB will also play a role as a bank for development and developers. And this cannot happen without the partnership. And the question is, how can these partnerships be really more effective and smarter? I'll start by introducing the panel. I cannot read their bios. It's going to take a long time, so I will just introduce them from my nearest side to the furthest side here. We have with us Dr. Mahmoud Muhyiddin, Senior Vice President of the World Bank, previously a Minister of Investment in Egypt for 7 years. More importantly for us, he's a scholar, he's a professor of economic and finance, and honestly, a great friend of IDB and a big supporter of Islamic finance. Thank you for being with us. Forgive me if I mispronounce the name, so Miss Victoria Adjoki, she is a senior special advisor to the President of Nigeria, and she is the focal point of SDGs, and she's been an active actor in the issues of women development in Nigeria, and we're very glad to have you with us. And thank you very much for coming from the airport straight to the podium. So thank you very much for being with us. Minister Fakhouri of Jordan, Minister of Economic and International, Minister of Planning and International Cooperation, a very distinguished minister. He was presiding over the World Bank, IMF annual meetings last October, and he's a fellow Harvard Kennedy School, so this is why we keep inviting him all the time. Welcome again to being with us. Next to him is Mr. Badruddin Wali from Tunisia. He's a bright private sector person, a techie, so he can address technology issues, but he has also another hat. He's an activist with NGOs, and we would like him to bring the attention to the involvement of NGOs and the private sector with the SDGs. Next to him is Mr. Arfin from Indonesia. He's the Deputy Minister of also Economic Planning, Bapenas. He's sitting in for Mr. Bambang, who wasn't able to make it in the last minute, but we also appreciate your being with us and speaking of the distinct experiences on SDGs in Indonesia. Next to him, Mr. Robert Piper from the UNDP, Assistant Secretary General. He's sitting in for Mr. Steiner, who also was given an assignment by Mr. Guterres, but we are very glad to have you here on such a short notice. And next to him is Mr. Chokai, if I said it right, forgive me. Okay. Thank you very much. And he's sitting in, he's the alternate governor, IDB alternate governor coming in for Mr. Shemshek. Mr. Shemshek sends his regrets. He had to cancel last night at 1 a.m., as I was told, for a very urgent cabinet meeting, I understand. So we're very happy also to have you all with us. So this is a multi-stakeholder, متعدد الأطراف, so to speak. By the way, I hope everybody has the translation. We have translation in English, Arabic, and French. Just please, somebody will bring you the headphones if you don't have them. So without further ado, let us start our discussion and our debate. And I'd like to start with the governments. I see Arabic on channel 1, English channel 3, French channel 2. So without further ado, we'll start with the governments so they don't give us trouble when we start talking about the SDGs. Why don't we start with Mr. Fakhoury? Jordan, we'll give each speaker 2 to 3 minutes as opening remarks. And then they were gracious enough to be open to questions. We might challenge them a little bit later on, but the idea is really to have their opening thoughts on SDGs in their countries. Minister Fakhoury, please.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much, Dr. Rami, for inviting us to be with you, and a great pleasure to be with His Excellency, the President, and with such a distinguished panel. Jordan, as a middle-income country in a geopolitically, I would say, extremely challenging location, has still remained very focused on its development agenda. Very early on, as we were shifting from the MDGs to the SDG process, we were one of the early pioneers that worked on formulating and contributing actively to the SDG agenda. We developed a very strong framework of, I would call it, process of how we are going to build our roadmap to achieve the SDG implementation after its adoption. We started with the framework actually adopted had several pillars from a certain set of guiding principles that we wanted to make sure were not done in a lip service, but in a real process. We looked at the enabling environment, the institutional setup, and the policies framework to ensure that the SDG process is mainstreamed into our development path and not a parallel structure that then gets, put on the shelf or gets only paid attention to whenever it is fashionable to do so. We developed then a detailed roadmap, and then we started the actual mapping of the goals, the targets, the indicators, and finally the implementation of the roadmap we've developed. On the guiding principles, we very quickly made sure that there is a very strong national ownership. And national ownership is not meant government ownership. I think one of the critical lessons that you started with, and that's the theme of this panel, is to really have a very multi-stakeholder process that very much represents ownership by government, by civil society, by parliament, by media, by NGOs, by women, youth, and by private sector, and by academia. And I'll talk maybe later about how we did that. We wanted to make sure we build on the prior experiences of the MDG, so that was the guiding principle 2. We wanted to make sure we look at best practices, but also build on the successes. And this was the recognition part, or guiding principle 3. We wanted to make sure to accelerate the SDG implementation, we carefully assess the interrelations between the different SDGs. And that was the 4th guiding principle. The 5th was the innovation side. How do we use innovative tools and approaches as we go along this path, which is a 15-year roadmap basically to get to achieve the SDGs. And of course, the participatory approach had to anchor the entire process. On the enabling environment, we very much, at the same time that the SDGs were being adopted, Jordan was developing its 10-year socioeconomic blueprint called the Jordan 2025 in 2015. So very much we made sure that the SDG objectives were very much integrated in this 10-year blueprint. And we deliberately did not go to a 2030 year. We didn't change the timing of the 10-year roadmap because it gives us a chance to assess at 2020 and 2025 achievements and then maybe add the last 5 years towards that process. We very much, out of this 10-year plan, Jordan has a medium-term integrated national development implementation plan. That is a 3-year rolling cycle. That's the basis for the budget process of the government. So we very much have been building into the successive 3-year rolling plans, the 10-year plan, the SDG requirements, and tracking then implementation along that path. On the institutional framework, we set up, as we did in the MDGs, as we also have for the Integrated National Development Plan, we set up a higher committee for the Sustainable Development Goals, led by the Ministry of Planning and International Cooperation as the coordinating or the focal point for the SDG. We have 18 working groups under it that represent a full partnership of government, private sector, civil society in each of those working groups. And within the higher committee, we have a full representation of the line ministries, the key government institutions, parliamentarians, the elected local councils, both municipal and at the different regions, academia, civil society, private sector, youth and women organizations, as well as, of course, the private sector. And within that framework, of course, we made sure that every working group has a clear linkage to which SDGs they're going to be working on. And then we developed a very detailed roadmap that is very much built around raising awareness, prioritizing and mapping, as I said, mainstreaming nationally, as well as subnationally, and I think the subnational is going to be a very tricky and challenging situation. We're in the process of trying to see how we do it while we're implementing a critical reform of decentralization in the country, building up the statistical capacity, because in our mapping we discovered that we probably track about only 40% of the indicators under the SDGs. I think the average globally has been about 45, or at best has not crossed the 50% level. So I think all of us are going to have a big challenge in terms of the statistical capacities and the way we build it. And maybe we need to consider ways to simplify this a little bit, because it's getting a little bit complicated tracking the so many indicators. Of course, the institutional framework that I mentioned within the roadmap, the SDG costing, we're now working with multiple partners to look at the costing requirements and building on the Addis Ababa Financing for Development scheme to figure out the financing roadmap to achieve the SDGs, which are within the National Integrated Development. And of course, finally, the monitoring and evaluation part.
Thank you very much. Actually, I attended your voluntary national review back in July in the UN. It's quite impressive, but I'll come back to you later on to see how much progress you have made. I'm not going to let you go very nicely from here until you tell us about the progress. But thank you very much for laying out this roadmap, basically, from costing to including all the partners in the planning. And we'll talk about the real progress that has taken place in Jordan. If I can move to Excellency Miss Victoria Adjoki, if I pronounce the name correctly. You can stop me here, correct me if you like, or if you can live with my pronunciation, that's fine. But we'd like you in 3 minutes or so to give us an idea on how you're going about partnership in a country with 36 provinces, or states you call them, a huge country, poverty issues, but at the same time, resources rich, and you have your plate full, I guess, of challenges as it comes to the SDGs. what are your thoughts on partnership for SDGs in Nigeria, please?
Thank you very much. Let me appreciate the commitment and the partnership and for inviting us to be part of this very important meeting. As a member state, we believe that the Nigerian government joined the Millennium Development Goal in 2006. The implementation took off in 2007. As we all know, the MDGs has 8 goals of social development. And of course, in 2015, the new government came on board, also adopted with the head of government on September 25th of 2015. With the Office of the Special Assistant to the President on Sustainable Development, which I head, we tried to review the successes we recorded during the MDGs and the failures. Why are we not? What are the things that we're supposed to have done that we did not do? And we realized the fact that lack of inclusion is one of the issues. Lack of ownership by the people was part of it, not only in Nigeria, but some of the member states. And these are some of the things that was embedded in SDGs. And as we know that SDG comes with 5 Ps, which is the people, the prosperity, peace, partnership, and planet. Those are the 5 Ps of SDGs. So when we talk about people, we believe that people must be part of the process. They must be included in the process and the framework, because all what we are talking about on SDG is that making life more meaningful to the people. And at this time around, we zero our calculation into 3 dimensions. This time around, goal 1 to 6 talks about social development and unfinished business of MDGs. And goal 6 to 12 talks about economic development. Goal 13 to 17 talks about climate change and environment. And to make it very simple for processes and administration. So we decided to come up with the institutional framework, the roadmap in which the framework will be adopted, which institutional framework to work with the government, subnational government, and the private sector group. Right now, we are working on mainstreaming SDG into national, subnational government to ensure that the people that we target understand what SDG is all about and benefit from the outcomes of SDG. Again, the government of Nigeria has embedded SDG into the national development, national economic development, which is national economic and growth plan of the government of Nigeria. And the outcome of NREG, National Recovery and Growth Plan, is the SDGs. And again, mainstreaming and domesticate that into the subnational government, both at the state, which is 36, and the 774 local governments. Again, we also believe that, unlike MDG, which is government-driven, SDG is all-inclusive. We set up the private sector advisory group about a year ago in Nigeria, and I believe Nigeria is one of the few member states that set up the private sector advisory group. After the launch of the private sector advisory group, who are in their clusters working in different areas to support the government of Nigeria, to take the outcomes of SDG to the people and to make the environment where they operate more sustainable for the people, to do sustainable business, and then the good causes to the people of Nigeria, which we have been doing in all sectors, communication, banking, oil and gas, and they were all there working with the government of Nigeria. Again, we also inaugurated the Donor Partnership Forum. The UN system was inaugurated in May last year by the President of Nigeria to see how we can work together, join hands together, partner with the government of Nigeria in a way that will be sustainable for the people of Nigeria. And the Civil Society Strategy Group also inaugurated. For the first time, and I think that at the highest level of governance, the Presidential Council on SDG was inaugurated. That was October last year before, and chaired by the President himself, and my office is the Secretariat to do that. And of course, the Presidential Council involved the Senate President, the legislators, the private sector, the civil society, the academia, the women, the children, and the government sectors leaders of the ministries. Because we have the sectors, water sector, education sector, economic sector, so we have those sectors represented at the Presidential Council for Sustainable Development, shared by the President. The essence of all this is that our budget must be aligned with SDGs, both at the national and sub-national government, to reflect the SDG, how water must be available, the schools must be available, especially when we have majority number of out-of-school children, how we can take them back to school, how we can bring big peace, and just help Nigeria, because we know that Boko Haram, insurgency and militancy ravaged Nigeria, which has been tamed to the barest minimum within 2 years, to allow for peace to reign. And if there's peace, there's prosperity. And of course, Goal 16 is very, very important to us. Talking about peace, justice, and strong institutions has helped Nigeria to ensure that we reduce the militancy as well as the insurgency in the Northeast. The people of the Northeast now are coming back home. The government set up a presidential committee to rebuild the Northeast so that people can go back to their homes, the children can go back to school, and we're happy to say that the dark chicks that were abducted were released recently. That is also a plus to us using the tool of SDGs to ensure that we have strong institutions. Again, we have collaboration with Nigeria Bar Association, the highest body of lawyers association in Nigeria, to ensure that they partner with our office to ensure that we give free legal services to the poor and vulnerable. One of the most important things is that the poor and vulnerable must have a voice in order not to leave anyone behind. And in doing that, we created a platform using the Nigeria Bar Association, all the branches in Nigeria, to provide free legal services to the poor and vulnerable. So not that you don't have money or you are poor, then your right will be violated. No, you must have a voice. In order to provide that, the National MBA has agreed to work with us. We've signed the MOU, we've done the training, and the program is on. Again, to also make this money, we have core champions. The core champions are the National Youth Service Corps member, posted all over the country as our...
I was going to keep this for the later question. I wanted to ask you on the localization.
That's localization of SDG.
Yes, I'll come back to this point. So if you like to conclude, so we come back, because I want to give it the due attention, this localization.
Yes.
We'll come back to it. So if you can conclude your opening remarks, we'll move on.
Really and truly, we presented our first national voluntary report in July last year, and the outcome was very, very appalling. We were very, very, very successful, and we got the report in December last year, and Nigeria was commended with what we have done so far. Really and truly, partnership is very key in sustainable, if you really want to achieve the sustainable development goal. And all the partners that we require were working closely with the government, and the government has only channeled its own economic recovery and growth plan into SDG, so that together we can have a very robust economy, working with the other partners to ensure that sustainable development is achieved and in no less time.
Thank you very much. And I think the simple fact that there is an office reporting to the president of the country gives a lot of weight to the commitment of the government, basically, to achieve the SDGs. And maybe this is something to food for thought in many of our 57 member countries who perhaps are listening to you today. I'd like to move to Indonesia, but please try to keep it to 3 minutes, just opening remarks, because I still have a lot of questions. So if you guys take the mic like this, I'm not going to be able to ask questions, and the audience will not be able to ask questions. With us also, we have the executive directors from Turkey, from Egypt. We have the president of Jamiat Al-Manar, the University of Al-Manar, and his professors also with us. So we have plenty of questions for you. So don't play with us this game where you talk a lot and then we don't have a chance to ask you, unless you want to fade away from these questions. Go ahead, please, Mr. Arfin, for 2-3 minutes, please.
Thank you, Dr. Rami. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. We know that SDGs is very complex, involving multi-sectors, environment, economic, and social. Also involving multi-stakeholders from the government and non-state actors as well. And also multiple level of government, central, provincial, and district in Indonesia. So what we need is only 3 things. First is political will. Second is strong legal basis. Third one is good strategy. For Indonesia, alhamdulillah, we already got the political will in which the president himself will lead the implementation of SDGs as a chair of steering committee. And he asked Bapenas, asked the Ministry of Development Planning to give report every 6 months. Also, the president making SDGs implementation as a movement in which we have a good experience for family planning movement 30 years ago. By using SDGs as a movement, so every stakeholders know what is SDGs, why we implement the SDGs, what the benefit of SDGs, and how to implement the SDGs. Once we have understanding from all stakeholders, then we got the commitment from all the stakeholders, from the central government, local government, from the academician, from the NGO, from business, and so on. As about the strong legal basis, we have presidential decree in which this give instruction to the Ministry of Development Planning to set up the National Action Plan. And all activities within this National Action Plan should be mainstream into Midterm Development Planning Plan. This is very important because all budget allocation should be based in this Midterm Development Plan. For the current development plan, we have 2015 and 2019, and also for the next government Midterm Development Plan from 2020 to 2024. The third one is a good strategy that reflecting in our National Action Plan. The first requirement for good strategy is inclusive participation. We involving all the stakeholders from the beginning when we are setting up the National Action Plan. So we hope to have a sense of belonging from all the stakeholders to using SDGs as the framework. Second, this National Action Plan also has a clear and measurable target and indicator in order to keep the accountability and also transparency. Third one, we have a clear source of budget from the public and from the private, from domestic, also from international source of funding. The fourth, we have a clear responsibility for each ministry, in which goal they has responsibility and what the target for each ministry. Also, we agreed about the monitoring and evaluation from the government, and also monitoring and evaluation from the non-state actors as well. We set up a self-assessment for all activities that done by non-state government, non-state actors. Last, we have also effective communication strategy, because to communicate about SDGs to students may be different method with communicate to village people and also communicate to corporate and so on. That's a short explanation. Thank you very much.
Interesting. SDG movement, huh?
Yes.
So you're taking SDG as a movement.
Yes.
because movement in some places gives some thoughts differently from a positive thought. How do you put it in a positive term?
Yes, by movement mean that everybody knows what is SDGs and how to implement SDGs and what are the benefits to implement the SDGs for them. Okay. So we agreed to use SDGs as the platform for doing together about to achieve the goal of SDGs.
What a way to ensure ownership, I guess, huh? Thank you very much. Let us move to Mr. Çatay from Turkey. Just a quick couple of minutes, please, on Turkey was one of the very first countries that submitted a voluntary national review on the SDGs back in 2016. So where are you at in Turkey on partnerships with the SDGs? Please, couple of minutes.
Thank you very much, Doctor. First of all, let me start by conveying our Deputy Prime Minister's message. He is very sorry for not being here with you today because of, as you said, very important cabinet meeting today in Ankara. So he sent his sincere apologies for not being here. I would like to give a broader picture about our development first, if you allow me. It has been a long and very challenging journey for Turkey, obviously. But when you look at it from an historical perspective, actually we started having a more institutional development effort back in 1963. Actually, it was our first. It is the time when we first actually announced our 5-year development plan, and from that point on, we were announcing 5-year development plans onwards. And currently we are working on our 11th development plan. This is to show that the effort is going much before than these MDGs. In that respect, obviously it has been a challenge to deliver. We have a very targeted approach. We try to tackle the root causes of the major problems like poverty and the other macro issues. But it has been a challenge, and looking at things retrospectively, the main determinants of development is actually, from our perspective, has been political stability as well as macroeconomic stability. So if you look at Republic's history since 1924, our average growth rate has been 4.7%. But if you just look at since 2002, actually it is much higher, 1 percentage point higher at 5.7%. And if you even look at the after global financial crisis, it is 2 percentage points higher. So macro stability and political stability is key. Obviously, it is also important to have a strategy to deliver. As long as you have a good strategy, as mentioned before, some former colleagues, it is really important. And I don't want to bore you with details, but Turkey has done significant strides in terms of reaching most of the crucial issues in terms of poverty reduction, in terms of education, especially after 2002, we did a lot in terms of improving access to education. If you look at the schooling rates from primary to all the way up to college levels, so we did really good. Now, obviously, it's a challenge for us to make the next move, because now we are a upper middle income country by World Bank standards, but we would like to be a high income country, and it's not easy. It has proven that it is not easy, actually. So we need another set of reforms. If you recall, we had a big financial and banking crisis in 2001, and then after that, we did significant reforms, both on the public administration side as well as macroeconomic management side. But so far, the place we come is obviously not enough, and we need another set of structural reforms, again on education, on business environment, on promoting investments locally. So there's a lot going on our structural reform agenda, and I think so in that respect, we saw no difference between our broader targets and with the SDGs. Actually, it's already embedded in our long-term development plans, but the place we are currently, obviously, it is not enough. We would like to deliver more for all the good reasons that SDGs actually are offering.
Thank you very much. Actually, the development efforts of many of the governments have been going for a long time. Mm-hmm. The idea of aligning with the SDGs is really very useful, because it's a universal framework where different countries speak the same lingo. And I know in Turkey, through your technical assistant arm, Tika, I think, you've been also very active in terms of SDG 17. Perhaps later on we can talk a little bit about this. Let us come back to Tunisia, the host country. We appreciate the hospitality of the Tunisian government, Tunisian people, and the Tunisian business people. We have Mr. Badr Wali from the private sector, and would like you to give your opening remarks, but the question always comes as we talk to private sector people, how can you achieve social progress while making money? I hope this is a good segue for your opening remarks. Tfaddal.
Well, to make it short, it's impossible to make development without money. So we need to make a lot of money first to ensure development. Let me, maybe most of you are not familiar with Tunisia. Tunisia is divided in two parts. A part near to Tunis and near to the sea, where it is more or less everything is working well, and a part that is outside this region, where everything is working significantly badly. And this is the case not only in the recent years, this is the case for at least 2,000 years, as if you take the borders of Carthage as an empire, and you look at success rate in the baccalaureate or in employment rate, the maps are recovering each other very perfectly. So we are facing basically a major failure in certain regions, and what we decided to do here in Tunisia is to make an experiment, try something different, which is make a public-private partnership for the education, especially in technology in these regions. And the government cannot do it because education and technology needs flexibility and needs agility, things that sometimes exist in the government, but it takes years to be achieved. And our target is to bring the unemployment rate for people that are in the technology sector at least at the same levels or below those of privileged regions.
Well, thank you, but which comes first? You said development or the money? Could you elaborate a little bit on this?
I think the money is the easy part.
So you're not seeking profits?
We are making a lot of profit, and that's why I'm here talking to you. Otherwise, I would never be admitted in this forum, I think.
Thanks for being so frank.
Nevertheless, what is important is the will and the ideas.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. We've basically looked at 5 countries. I'd like to recognize in the audience several of our governors and alternate governors and executive directors, ministers also. So I think this is a good place to just see different experiences that we have from our different member countries. Now, if I could move to the international organizations, just to get a flavor of these big guys, what they are doing to help our member countries basically achieve real partnerships. I'll start with Dr. Mahmoud Mahiddin, who's been a guru for partnership for many years. And I don't want to give an introduction for your remarks, but you guys are giving good advice for partnership. But is it lip service in a way because it's fancy and fashionable to talk about partnerships? Or are you measuring your progress, you and us and all the other MDBs basically? When we talk about partnerships, we have many forums, we have many conferences, we have deep inside when you sleep and when you go to bed, Dr. Mahmoud, as a guru in partnership, you think we are having a good, effective partnership in the MDB communities, in the development communities?
Thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Let me start first in Arabic, and don't consider that in your time count, please. سعيد للغاية أن أكون في تونس الخضراء بلد ابن خلدون الذي قوم صعود وهبوط الأمم وبلد بيرم التونسي أو بيرم المصري على حسب ما تحب أنك تنظر إليه. وبيرم صاحب حكمة. دكتور رامي في البداية اتكلم عن ما يعرف بالكولكتيف ويزدم أو الحكمة الجامعة التي نكتسبها بالخبرة. لكن بيرم التونسي قال لولا النقاد لهلك الناس ولطغى الباطل على الحق ولم تطل أراذل ظهور الأفاضل وبقدر ما يخفت صوت الناقد يرتفع صوت الدجال. وسعيد أن أكون في رحاب جامع الزيتونة وبلاد ناهضة معروفة بقدراتها وباهتمامها بالتعليم والتعلم، وهي مثال طيب لحراك الطبقة الوسطى. أما بعد, in English, you asked our good guests, including our good friend from the business sector of Tunisia, a very difficult question, whether finance or the project or development. And there are two schools of thought, as you all know. One is belonging to Mrs. Robinson, the great professor of financial development economics. And she says basically that finance follows. If you have a good idea, good project, good approach, finance follows. And then you have the other school, which is known as the McKinnon Shaw School, that tells you that finance leads. The evidence shows, as indicated by the minister, that it's issue of a two-way kind of street. So what partnerships are about? This very difficult question, and how they will succeed. You may remember, Dr. Rami, when we started the whole thing about the SDGs, we started with three things: data, finance, and implementation. How to achieve the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. You need evidence, you need good finance, and you need good implementation. And implementation has to be localized. It is like not global achievement. At the end, it will be by aggregation. But if not, the localities and the communities are feeling advances in education, in health, in the quality of life, in the inclusion, all what we talk about at the global level is going to be just a statistical aggregation that may give a better picture than the reality. And I can really say from the experience of more than 15 years of tracing the MDGs, because done MDGs 2015, we have been following what happened. The world at a global perspective looks very nice, but this is thanks to some good doers and achievers like China, India, Indonesia, and some of the many middle-income countries. Some of them are here today. But at the same time, you can go and look at what happened at the country level, and within the country, you'll be seeing great discrepancies. So this is on the issues related to implementation. I'm starting with the first one. We need really to localize what's global. And this is very difficult. How to get that big SDG into a kind of a village-based or a district-based kind of an approach that would be of implementation agenda, that would be very difficult. And then how to finance it. This is a very big thing, and I came across of a letter that you need all to read. This is coming from a very practical perspective from the CEO of the biggest asset manager in the world, BlackRock. And the CEO sent to all of the companies that he is willing to do business with. His name is Larry Fink. He told them that we need really to move beyond corporate social responsibility. And each company must ask itself 6 questions. I will not go through them. The letter is available on the internet. But the first one of them, what role do we play as companies in the community? How are we managing our impact on environment? How can we harness the impact of technological change in this new automated world? And I think there is a very good emphasis by the Islamic Development Bank to get us into this STI, or the science, technology, and innovation, as part of the aspects related to good implementation and good finance. But with finance, you need really to consider how to filter, how to provide the better funding, and how to trace them. And this gets us into data. And again, you started with wisdom, Dr. Rami, al-hikmah. So in order to have wisdom, you need to have information. And actually, before information, you need to have knowledge. So Wisdom depends on knowledge, knowledge depends on information, and information depends on data. And I'm telling you that we are not that wise because we don't have no data. What is the first SDG, Dr. Rami? Barakallahu feek. Thank you so much. Good question, good answer. So SDG, we are constrained by knowledge because if you are telling me what is the data about SDG 1 performance, we are constrained at 2013. We have no clue about what's happening in poverty globally beyond 2013. This doesn't negate the fact that some of the countries presented here, like Nigeria or Jordan, they can tell us, well, we have more up-to-date data than this. But when you do global comparisons, you are constrained with the worst performer in the data. So, and this is the prime goal of the sustainable development, and we are very much constrained by data. And then get us into this big disruption, data, finance, and implementation. Then comes technology. Technology, if you quote the head of Google, and the Economist magazine just referred to him by saying that technology through artificial intelligence will be either more and better than fire as a discovery of how to use it and how to harness it, or electricity. You can always have a good use of fire to give you some sort of guidance in a dark road, or to have some good grilled fish in Halq al-Wadi. But you can really put it into some bad use. The same for electricity. You can use it to empower machines or to have an electric shock. And now we have this issue of technology in every aspect of it. Very quickly, I can see that you are using your weapon, the microphone. So very quickly, I'll tell you. On data, Madame Lagarde of the IMF said that today, 95% of the data we have been created during the last 2 years. So this could be great news. So we can use this data. But however, this kind of data is used for something else. Some of them is good, and some of the stuff is bad, as we have seen with the manipulation of data. So either that you can use data right in order to get better information to help the people, or you can use the data to manipulate people and misguide them. You may have seen this cartoon by somebody complaining to one of the head of the technology company that have been implicated in this data business. So this young kid told the CEO of that big company, my dad is telling me that I have to be careful with data. So the answer of that CEO, who told you that he's your dad? So it's basically manipulating even the fact about that. So the other thing about finance, financial inclusion, and I was with good discussion with the two ladies there about the use of financial inclusion on access to finance to women, that is simplifying the access to finance in the different countries, including in Egypt, my home country. But at the same time, bad use of technology can really have disasters. One of the disasters in the making, if we are not really dealing with its bad implications, what's so-called cryptocurrencies. And these are disasters in the making. Quoting the CEO of BIS, they are a bubble in the making. They are, our boss, the president of the World Bank, said they are a Ponzi scheme. And then Madame Lagarde of the IMF, she said that they will have dark side of them and disruptive to monetary stability. And then somebody else, I think it was Mr. Costin, he said that they are environmental disaster because all of these people have been using machines in order to do the mining. But at the meantime, it's basically about how to use fintech. Is it for access to finance for sustainable development, or you are going to be making it to provide a kind of a pyramid scheme or a Ponzi scheme? So we need to take this issue of technology, take them with you on the data, the finance, and the implementation, and in order to enhance the partnerships. And then for the very short answer for your good question on partnerships, now we have the 3 Bs and the 3 Ps, and we shouldn't be confusing them. The public-private partnership for build, boost, broker. Build foundations for sustainable technology-led economies. This is the build. Boost the capacity of people and institutions to thrive in resilient society in the face of disruption of technology. And finally, be the broker to harness disruptive technology. Partnerships are great. SDGs are basically going to be talking about games. You talked about games. They are games of partnerships and coordination. But as partnerships in life, including in marriage, they could come with accidents, God forbid, in divorce. And you may know through your knowledge that divorce is not really the worst outcome of a bad marriage. So we need to be very careful about incentives, about clarity, about purpose, about the stability of the contractual arrangement for these kind of partnerships. This panel, while we're happy talking together, even with our friends from the UN, UNDP, we have different structures, different governance, different incentives. Private sector, they have differently. Government, they have their own plans at the same time. How to get that together in harmony to achieve the objectives, it needs really leadership, patience, and honesty from the very beginning. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mahmoud, for this frank talk. I guess now you see why لولا النقاد لهلك الناس. If it wasn't for the self-criticism, basically, we would all, I don't know how to translate halak الناس, but I think it's crucial. It's very crucial that we have a critical look at what we do. Sometimes we have the tendency to go into some isomorphic mimicry. It looks nice, it sounds nice, it's good for a speech of a president or a minister or a prime minister, or it might look good in front of these MDBs so they can give money, part of the conditionality that some of the MDBs put in place, and the countries will go and perhaps see the data in a different way, at least to make us look good in front of. So this self-criticism and putting all the issues on the table, aligning the incentives among us as MDBs, and definitely between the private sector, the public sector, we need to really put issues on the table and have a clear discussion. And without this, the politics will not take us very far, and we end up with divorce or doubting who is our dad, I guess, huh? Thank you very much, Dr. Mahmoud. Let us go to the UN, since he passed you the ball, Mr. Piper. He said even between the World Bank and the UN, the structures are basically not aligned. When you go to a country, and not always aligned, thank you, but when you go to a country as UNDP, and you're trying to help them assess their readiness for partnerships and SDGs, what do you do? What has been your experience? Do you have a one-size-fits-all? Do you have a prescription that you take in your pockets when you go to these countries? What do you do?
I think we're all, thank you, Dr. Rami, I think we're all on a learning curve in this. We're all challenged. I agree absolutely with Mahmoud and others. For us, the SDGs have really challenged the UN development system, whether we can come together in a multi-sectoral way, whether we can bring a much more diverse set of partners to the table, and whether we can improve the quality of our policy advice. The UN development system has come together around a methodology we call MAPS, mainstreaming to do with landing the SDGs into national and local policies, acceleration to make sure we find special investments that will really move the SDGs forward, and of course policy support to support governments to do the right thing and to have the right options. MAPS, we call it. It's been done now in about 28 countries, in a number with the World Bank. The Asian Development Bank has joined part of this process, at least in one country. And we think it's a very robust way of getting started in a really analytical way, because I think when you're talking about partnerships, you ought to start with clarity about what is the task and how you're going to go about doing it and work backwards from that. UNDP works at the core of this in 170 countries, providing all kinds of technical assistance with parliaments, with statistical commissions, with planning and with planning ministries, rolling out tools, etc. I think for us, though, the new frontier where we are feeling our way, and it's the core of this question of partnerships, is really around financing. The estimate for the cost of the SDGs is somewhere in the vicinity of $2.5 trillion to achieve them. Now, aid, ODA, is in the vicinity of $130, $140 billion a year. It's a drop in the ocean. And I think this has really confronted
us as development professionals with this question of completely rethinking our approach to financing. And this has brought us into all kinds of very interesting discussions. UNDP works with at least, I think, 28 governments so far on development financing assessments, looking at the landscape, at what are the different options. We're working with social impact investors. A recent survey of a couple of hundred investors produced something like $114 billion worth of investments going on in social impact investments. They need to be brought in. We've spoken of Islamic finance, your bank's estimates of something like $500 billion a year. We're very proud, in fact, Indonesia is perhaps the most advanced in our relationship on Islamic finance, and we've worked with Apenas and others in Indonesia to get these green bonds, sukuk I think they're called, to get actually funding into renewable energy. Some very innovative work that really started in Indonesia and is now being rolled out in other countries like the Philippines and elsewhere. Domestic revenue is another piece of the puzzle. We work with the OECD, with tax inspectors without borders to try and improve government's abilities to raise its own revenues, and so far about $300 million has been produced across 25 countries. And then there are the vertical funds, the climate funds and so forth, where UNDP has several hundred ongoing projects. And it isn't only about accessing directly these vertical funds. We have something like a $3 billion portfolio of climate funds in UNDP at the moment. But more importantly still, this is leveraging something like $14 billion worth of resources from governments, from the private sector, and so forth. So I think for us, the key challenge really on these partnerships, and it's a new terrain, I think, for many of us, is how to really broaden the stakeholders to come around this financing task. It is much greater than anything we've ever really faced.
Do you have mechanisms to ensure the implementation of your recommendations as you finish your MAPS missions to the countries?
Well, I think there's no secrets here. I think it starts with clarity about what you want to do. It starts with ownership, as we've talked about, but not only at the national level, but at the local level, as we heard from various people this morning. But it also comes with opening ourselves up to scrutiny and to transparency. I think if you can give some of the stakeholders, whether it's youth, women's groups, parliaments, real access to the progress and also be able, as you said, to be our critics and to keep the momentum, I think that's absolutely core to success. But the other element here, and I'll stop on this, is the market. I think here we can have these win-win situations where the private sector can indeed make profit, but also lift all boats and advance SDGs through technology and so forth in ways that we could never have done alone in the public sector, then I think that certainly is a new ingredient that we're only just learning, I think, to harness.
Okay, well, since you mentioned the parliamentarians, maybe this is a good point to flash this report. This is a report on parliamentarians' role in implementing sustainable development goals. It was done, it's a joint effort between the IDB and the UNDP and GOPAC. Perhaps you'd like to say a couple of points since we are at it, and then we'll move to the other panelists, please.
I'm sorry we don't have our Member of Parliament from Morocco on the panel.
Yeah,
I think we do consider this piece of the puzzle absolutely crucial. UNDP is the biggest provider of technical assistance to parliaments around the world. At any given time, we're working with at least 1 in 3 parliaments. And we've increasingly putting a lot of energy into the SDG issue, how to better equip parliaments to participate in the SDG process, to monitor the progress. We provide specialized training and so forth. We're very proud of a recent partnership with the Islamic Development Bank, which is focused on the Arab region initially. We have produced, as you said, a handbook for Arab parliamentarians on implementing the SDGs. We have a draft regional strategy from Arab parliamentarians on advancing the SDGs. We have a high-level political event in New York next month, and we're starting pilots in 4 countries. So I think this is the kind of collaboration we need to see more of.
Excellent, and I think we should give credit to ESCWA also. I see a couple of ladies from ESCWA because they hosted this last November, and it was an exciting discussion with the Arab parliamentarians. Parliamentarians really need to play their role in advancing the agenda of the SDGs, whether it's in the planning, in the budgeting, the oversight, and really the representation of their constituency. And parliaments are not as effective. I mean, they vary in their effectiveness, but the idea is to help them with some guidelines to go about their really doing their job in perhaps helping the governments in one way or another, pushing the agenda of the SDGs. You mentioned the Indonesian experiment in Islamic finance. And we read a lot about the zakah and the sadaqah and the waqf specific for SDGs, which is quite interesting and maybe useful to some of our member countries to see, and perhaps at one point through some reverse linkage mechanism that we have, we could use this expertise to the rest of our member countries. Could you take a minute just to tell us about zakah for SDGs?
Making SDGs as a movement, then we have support from many NGOs. We have 2 types of NGOs, religious-based NGOs such as Nahdlatul Ulama, Muhammadiyah, and also Indonesian Ulama Council, and non-religious based. As a result, we have a memorandum of understanding between National Coordination Team with Indonesian Ulama Council to use zakah to develop social basic services, especially for clean water in remote area. Yeah. As you know, Indonesia is mostly Muslim, so we need water before praying. This is very important. And we agreed to do zakah to develop these facilities.
But what mechanisms did you use? What tools did you put in place for the collection of zakah and the employment in water projects, for example?
We have MOU with the Indonesian Ulama Council and using SDGs platform, the National Action Plan, as a basis for the activities. So for each action plan, for example, water is in goals number 6, if I'm not sure. We have detailed planning for each area and for each goals. For water, we have what the government will do to develop the water and what the non-government actors do, including the source from zakah. This is the common platform, and for all the 34 provinces, we have a regional action plan as a basis for zakah utilization, especially for clean water development. Yeah.
Interesting. I think this is, I would say this is on the track to being a smart partnership. You have a lot of money being given ad hocly. Everybody would like to pay the zakah. And sometimes I know many people don't know how to put the zakah in the right use. So if the governments or the NGOs really provide that vehicle, I guess people championing the domestic mobilization of resources will be very happy to exploit such tools to employ zakah and sadaqah and waqf for the sake of SDGs. I'll go back to Ms. Victoria Adjoki. Localization. What are you doing on localization of the SDGs, given that you have 36 states and you are connected to the president of the country?
When talking about maps, mainstreaming, acceleration, mainstreaming, acceleration of SDGs. So it is important for us to domesticate, to prioritize, and to mainstream to the subnational government. knowing that subnational government are about the people, because SDG is about people. So the people are the grassroots. So it is important for us to mainstream and work with the subnational government. Part of what we have done is to provide a fund known as Conditional Grant Scheme for the subnational, to assist the subnational government in implementation of some social development programs and projects for the benefit of the people of the local. So the national government provides 50% to be matched by the subnational government, individual state, as well as the local government, annual budget, through tax resource mobilization. Again, we have also monthly meetings of the desk officers, and we have monthly meeting of the governors, my office, shared by the Vice President of Nigeria to see what are needed to be done aside from that. When that one, we've seen that one is moving, is giving us a good look. The legislator partnership also, which had been established, are working on a bill to have SDG fund. The bill at the committee stage, second reading, which at the committee stage, working to have a fund from both the private sector, the donors, the public, for the implementation of SDG, in addition to the taxes.
But the proceeds will be used to implement the government plans.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, to support the implementation.
So the contributors, sorry to interrupt you, the contributors to this SDG fund basically has no way of saying where they want it to be used. It will be going to support the government plans to implement SDGs.
The role of the legislators is to make the law. So make the law for the government, the executive. And the fund will be managed by both government and private sector, civil society organization, and other stakeholders for the implementation of SDGs. Okay. So also in localizing, we believe that Nigeria is a big place with huge, with about 200 million people. We believe that getting to the grassroots, we need some representative. So we decided to use the National Youth Corps Service, the members of the Youth Corps, as SDG Corps champions in all the local government in Nigeria, 2 per local government of 774. They will identify the gap. And if there's no school, there's no water, they collect report, aside from the costing exercise that is ongoing. The costing exercise is going now. I'm sure in the next 3 months we'll finish the costing exercise to know how much we will require as a country to implement SDGs. But by that is made, the core champions are there working for us. We started last year. So they have the report to the state coordinators, and the state coordinator refer to us. If there's an urgent intervention, relay directly to us through the website and quickly intervene. So again, we have the civil society organization also charged with that responsibility to resolve domestic issues, to ensure that children are going to school, and to mobilize fostering for us. If the parents cannot afford, how do we now get fostering parents to foster a child to go to school? And the government of Nigeria also have developed, since last year, school feeding program to feed about 8 million children a day, 1 meal a day for all the children, so that we can have more children in school because of the level. So again, we have the GEEP program, Government Enterprise and Empowerment Program, for the parents to ensure that they have something to do, give them loan, train them, give them loan in agriculture, at a startup, or to grow your business at no interest rate, and for a period of 1 year to use the money and return the money. So we have Empower program, we have conditional cash transfer. Also, conditional cash transfer is for the poor and the needy. So government pay every month to each of the family a stipend to support them to eat and to take good care of them. We have a series of programs, social investment program, linked to my office for the people of Nigeria.
That's very interesting. Thank you very much. We see planning with heart here, I guess, the name. But SDG fund is quite an interesting thought also. You mentioned the civil society, and this after this we'll open it to the audience for some questions. But I'll go back to Mr. Badruddin, and would like you to put your other hat as the activist with NGOs. How could the NGOs really play a role in advancing the SDGs cause? From your experience in Tunisia, I know you're involved in Smart Tunisia, you're involved in other NGOs doing good work. Could you take a couple of minutes before we turn it to the audience for questions, please?
Thank you. You know, maybe there are two main ideas that direct our action. First is that should be a sound economical base for any development. So you cannot, you know, train people for, let's say, I don't know, agriculture in a desert, you know, things like this. So the link to the efficiency is key there. And the second thing is that when we act in the private sector, we have the ability to choose where to act and where it is important. Here, for example, in Tunisia, when the government has an action, it has to be all around the country. They cannot do an action in one region and the other will complain. When you are in an NGO, so you have this flexibility. So first, you will not do something because of political pressure. You will do it only because there is a sound economical reason. And second, you can say, no, I will act in this region A and not in region B. And this, of course, make your action much more efficient and in the time frame, because when you implement in 3 regions, it's much more efficient than in 24. And economically, it's also very efficient. Of course, I would like to add that I made money on my business selling software and not in my business for NGOs. But this was obvious, right?
Well, halal, inshallah. But what I'm saying is the NGOs, does it always come like a beautifying things for our activities, or do you think they could play a role in really influencing the government plans or the legislative aspects of the parliaments? From your experience, have you seen any effectiveness of such a move, or they are on the other side of just receiving the NGOs? I'm going to.
Well, the government has a couple of problems acting on the ground. We think in Tunisia, for example, that we need, you know, a system of competition when we apply to participate to a market, because this ensures transparency and avoids corruption. And as you may know, if you know Tunisia, this never was the case. So corruption is there and it's increasing, and transparency is completely absent. So today, in fact, at the end of the day, the government has processes that makes it inefficient, and at the same time, the objectives why these processes were built are not reached at all. So within a public-private partnership, we have this flexibility to get rid of all these paperwork, inefficient actions, and so on. But at the end, we will never be the government. We will act as an experiment, and if the experiment works, then it's to the government to take the rest of it. Except in some, and I will finish with this, I'm also leading a NGO called Réseau Entreprendre, where we help young people to build their company. Of course, for the advisory business, only somebody who created or who is running a business could advise another person to run a business. So civil servants are very efficient for many things, but not to advise you how to make money in the private sector.
Very diplomatic way of putting it.
So for these things, you need soft consultancy. You need you need to use the private sector. So you cannot buy time for business owners, so you can only ask them gently to offer their time for others. And this works very efficiently.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I still have many questions, but I think we need to be fair to the audience. I might come back to Minister Fakhouri and Dr. Mahmoud Muhyiddin on the idea of global councils. Last month, they launched the Global Council. For every SDG, there is a global council headed by an eminent personality, and we're very happy to have with us Minister Fakhouri, who's the chairman of the Global Council on SDG 8, Inclusive Growth and Decent Jobs, and Dr. Mahmoud Muhyiddin is the chairman of the Global Council on SDG 1, Ending Poverty. So perhaps after a round of questions, we'll get back and you can squeeze your thoughts on these two global councils in the discussion. Before we open it up, actually, we are very happy also to have the executive director from Egypt with us. He's executive director on the board of ISDB, and unfortunately, Minister Sahard was not able to make it. I'd like you to answer one question that was on the minds of many people. Egypt has submitted the voluntary national review twice. Why? Do you like this business, or what's happening here? Could you please address this very quickly? If you can have a mic here.
Thank you, Mr. Rami. Yes, we pioneered twice, we submitted twice. The first time, the core reason was to highlight a clear commitment from the government through establishing focus committees and align all the different stakeholders from the government, from the public sector, and everyone in terms of increasing awareness. So we wanted everyone to be aligned in terms of SDGs. It was more than, the first one was more an inception report. Where are we standing today? What is missing in terms of data? There was a key role in that phase from CAPMAS, which is responsible for all the data in Egypt, statistical data and so on. The missing data parts were big, as His Excellency also Ahmed Fakhouri mentioned. Data was a clear issue. It was also a very unique opportunity in the beginning to detect things we need to work on. So aligning this also within our clear agenda with all the other indicators we're working on and so on. And another reason was in terms of what did it result into the first review, that we highlighted clear elements we have to work on, especially the clear gap in terms of financing, especially when we talk about infrastructure development. We need to work more on infrastructure and so on, that we need to engage more the private sector. And this was followed by a number of legislative and institutional reforms, like laws which make it easier not only to enter the market but also to exit the markets through the insolvency law, but also the companies law was amended to take into consideration more innovative structures like convertible notes, preference shares and so on, and also to have an institutional setup in terms of servicing the investor to improving the business climate. The second review, just very slowly, was important also because it showed on the commitment, the ongoing commitment, that we wanted to say, okay, after 1 year, what did we do? What did the committees do? And accordingly, more things were found out, especially innovation. We needed to focus on innovation. And one thing which was mentioned also by the panelists, we started to focus in terms of how to engage with local entrepreneurs, how to invest in innovation. We established a company called Egypt Ventures, which is seeded by the government, but it's only a seed capital which is followed by the private sector. And here we have a special fund we established, an accelerator with UNDP, which is through the social impact. It's a social impact accelerator, where we invest in startups who have an impact on the SDGs, on a seed stage, and then followed by private sectors to invest on. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Shihab. And I was wondering if the executive director from Turkey would like to say anything. Dr. Uthman, in the front row, please. In the front row. Just maybe a couple of minutes, please. Very quickly, thank you.
Thank you, Brother Rami. As you know, the Turkey is the first OIC country to fulfill the SDGs. And Turkey has adopted the ambition of the Millennium Development Goals and subsequently the Sustainable Development Goals, and reflected our dedication on short, medium, and the long-term policy agenda. And as my colleague Çağatay said, that in accordance with this dedication, in the last 15 years, Turkey has placed Turkey has placed herself among the runners in terms of eradicating the extreme poverty, reducing the child mortality, improving maternal health, and ensuring environmental sustainability. And as the government is very crucial for the government, these goals are very crucial, and we are continue to increase the development on these SDGs. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We open the floor now for Q&A. Please identify yourself and try to target the question to one or two of the panelists at least, so be more specific. So I see a lady in front, please.
Hello. I'm Dr. Amania Asfour. I am president for the World Association for Business and Professional Women. And I'm also the chairperson for COMESA Business Council. So I am really the voice of the private sector and the civil society. Thank you very much for all the panelists. You have mentioned how can we have profit and development. Also the role of civil society in actually implementation of SDGs. We are advocating for 3 issues: government procurement, corporate procurement, and financial inclusion. We can see the government of Nigeria, huge tenders, $15 trillion every year for government procurement. Women have only access to 1%. How can we really empower our local private sector, including women and youth, with reference to access to the government procurement? Kenya implemented this. 30% now of all government procurement goes to SMEs, women, youth, and disabled. Another issue about corporate procurement. We have big multinational companies in our member states working, how they are referring to the community, like Dr. Mohiddin is just said. They are now putting corporate procurement to SMEs, including women and youth. How can you help this? We as civil society, we are training the women and youth to meet the tenders. We are training them to meet the corporate procurement because they need criteria to meet the requirements. Financial inclusion. So we need now to have access to finance to empower our private sector on the ground to meet this. Or else, if we do want to have no poverty, inequality, injustice, we don't want the gap between the multinational companies and our local private sector. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This is now, I understand why 4 hands were up when I didn't mention SDG 5. So thank you very much for bringing the issue of women empowerment in there. I see a question in the middle over there. So we'll try to take one here, one there, and we move on. The gentleman in the tfaddal. Please identify yourself, and it's preferable that it's a quick comment with a question. And this is defined something that ends with a question mark, so our panelists can address that.
Abdurrahman Badi, Islamic Development Bank. 2 questions. The first question is to Dr. Mahmoud Mohiddin. So I know that you have talked about recently the role of youth in implementing and advancing the agenda of SDGs. So what specifically youth can do and how to streamline them in this movement? My second question is to Ms. Orelope Aderfuller. I hope I pronounced the name correctly. One of the biggest challenges for Nigeria to achieve SDGs is on SDG 4, which is education. In fact, I understand that Nigeria has the highest number of out-of-school children. So what is your plan and what is for implementation? I know that IDB is very much interested in partnering with the Nigeria government in these SDGs. Already 100 million is approved, and we want to know what is your plan to develop this partnership in SDGs 4. Thank you.
Thank you. One more question, maybe from the other side, if we have on the left. I saw a hand here. Please, the mic.
Olaide Fatoyinbo. I'm an ophthalmologist, public health specialist. I'm a Nigerian based in Ivory Coast. My question is towards Excellency. First, you mentioned something about the COP members being used. How do you ensure the problems get directly to you? Because not in all cases, you'll be able to get their messages. Then the second question is, are these partners allowed directly to go to each of the region or the state to implement whatever without the national body getting to know about it? Thank you very much.
Thank you. And one last question before we go to the panelists. Maybe we can go for another round. On the right side, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. My name is Najib Abid.
I like this. Could you repeat that again, please?
Thank you, Mr. President. My name is Najib Abid. I am from Tunisia.
Welcome.
I'm a board director of the International Association of Science Park and Innovation, headquartered in Research Triangle in North Carolina. And I am more in consulting now. I was a former CEO of a science park in Sfax. So I stopped here because I saw the title of this meeting is a smart partnership. And today, my question is oriented more for the decision makers in Turkey, Nigeria, maybe Tunisia. So I was a research engineer within Nokia maybe 20 years ago. And I remember when we talked about smart partnership, it's about how to be involved in one sector in the right moment. So today, the war is about talents. And if we are not involved in the intelligent artificial or the energy in the right moment, we're gonna be consumers. And I remember within Nokia 20 years ago, they prepared a what called ISIS, Information Survey for Information Society, European Information Society Survey. And that time, they saw that the future of the platform of e-learning will be 10 years, after 10 years. And they prepared their talents to prepare their startup to sell their product for us. So I think smart partnership is also about right moment, right sector. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Let us go to the panelists and maybe start with the last one. Could you say something about Smart Tunisia? And he's talking about smart partnerships is something that is intervention on a timely basis. Otherwise, we could be intervening to serve a cause that it will no longer be viable in a very short period of time.
Thank you. I completely, do you hear me? Yeah. I completely agree with you that the battle is a battle of talent. And what we are trying to face here in Tunisia, and by the way, I'm not a decision maker, I'm just from the private sector, is to address one big issue. The usual cycle to change the programs in the national education is between 15 and 20 years. While in technology, we are talking about short cycles. And we noticed that for the newly educated people, as well as for those that are jobless, the problem they have is that was an inadequate education that brought them to this position. So working very closely with the government, I mean the private sector, we can try to make these cycles much shorter and prepare people with the right system. It's not a win. We did that as a pilot. We did that for hundreds, for some thousands of people, but we need to do that for tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands. And this is not, this is ahead of us already yet, I mean.
Thank you. Dr. Mahmoud, what makes a partnership smart? Could you address this?
By partnering with those who are smarter than you. You have first to admit your comparative disadvantage before you acknowledge your comparative advantage. As a World Bank group, could be the oldest development financing institution in the world. We have more than 18,000 of members of staff. We grant on average 100 billion plus in different forms of finance, including conventional, Islamic, with partnership with the private sector. But when it gets into this smart business, while we are creating some internal capacity at the bank to understand more what can we do in partnerships with the likes of GSMA, as the president of the bank announced a new partnership with those big operators of mobile systems, to have new partnerships with those who are using satellite images in order to understand better what's happening in the field, and to have partnerships with those who are managing data, including a new partnership with LinkedIn for job markets, the supply and demand side, including using the graphics for the migration of jobs. So it's basically about how to create all of these partnerships and to be prepared, as I tried to mention as well, for accidents, because you are dealing with different organizations. On the issue of the NGOs and the role of parliaments, I'm not concerned about the role of the NGOs because they have been at the business for many, many years. Actually, they were active even before the MDGs time, and they are coming all different sizes, and some of them are crossing borders, like Gates Foundation, and some of them are dealing with grassroots kind of challenges. The concern is really with the private sector. And again, they come in different levels, with the smaller micro enterprises to the mega conglomerates, and how to align their business priorities with the SDGs. That you can really do it in different ways, leaving it to its own dynamics and market and General Assembly kind of governance, or you help that through what you just mentioned about the role of parliaments as regulators, and more importantly, as the budget setters. You were talking about the voluntary reviews. We have more than 66 voluntary reviews so far. We are going to be having more than 44 added to that line in July. And you'd be surprised that only less than 10 countries have a kind of adequate mention to the budget implications. So it's basically about priorities for the future without really having the budget line. So if you want really to encourage the parliament to do better in this area of sustainable development, they need to do three things. First is to have a budget system and a budget in all levels, from local to central government, aligned with the sustainable development goals. This is not because us doing that, because the Leaders' Summit of all members of the UN agreed that this is the priority for the 2030. And if you are not going to be having the budget for it, you are not going to be allowing the private sector to do its business, because most of the work is going to be based on this kind of budget, not just as procurement, as Dr. Amani Asfour mentioned, but basically the kind of incentives that the budget is going to be signaling for the private sector. About the PPPs, now one of the areas that we are not going to be working on forever, I hope in the future, based on the good Jordanian example, is that our line of business is not going ever to crowd out the private sector from doing some infrastructure projects. So if the Arab contractors are going to do business, they are going to be doing that in partnership with private sector finance. But that needs to be reflected in budget. The other thing that the parliament can do is the coordination, because starting with the coordination between members of government themselves. And I'm honest to say that I'm in Washington and New York almost in the same week, sometimes in the same day, and I see a different language from what I hear from the ministers of foreign affairs and other representatives in New York, and what I get from the ministers of finance. And we take that very seriously as given, because these governments are basically the owners of the World Bank, and they are the owners of the Islamic Development Bank. And if I'm not really seeing these kind of signals aligned, yes, there are great examples of good coordination, but there are very bad examples of zero coordination, which is confusing everybody, including the development partners. The third thing is basically about the role of Parliament in localization, because members of Parliament are coming from constituencies. So they will be reading more and more about what's happening at the national level, so they would need to be the link on that. Finance is available, despite the shortage for those who are serious to get it, and I can see many countries, many of them in this panel today and in the room, are able to mobilize the funding despite the constraints. Right. And others who are rejecting the opportunities, even if their resources are ample within their own reach, because of the fact lack of coordination, lack of management, no institutions, bad policy coordination. And it is not up to us in the World Bank to tell countries how to do that. We can provide finance, we can improve your data systems, we can provide the capacities, but we cannot really tell a country what can they do. Even if we have some ideas, it's going to be a failure to assume a government role and a leadership role.
Definitely, but I hope you would agree with me that the capabilities of the parliaments vary from one country to one country. Yeah, sometimes absolutely. People sitting in Washington and New York, with all due respect, they think they could send a prescription, and these parliaments are not necessarily capable of, or not necessarily believing in what this prescription is coming. So I think, and as you ended your intervention by saying the local ownership and the local belief in the problems they want to solve is really the key to start, and MDB's international organization could basically just give support to this. I see Minister Fakhouri, but before this, I would like to give the floor to Ms. Victoria, very quickly please, to address the SDG 4 on education in Nigeria, and the question of the lady on how do you know the problem is coming to your office. But please, very quickly, because we have less than 5 minutes to wrap up everybody.
Yes, thank you for that question. I think that of the 1.4 out of school children we have, where 80% of them are from the northern Nigeria, orphaned by Boko Haram insurgency. And as I speak now, the plans by government through the Presidential Initiative on the Development of Northeast, the World Bank, the UNICEF, and my office are working so hard to get them back to school. 80% of the school are under completion now for them to get to school. We also wanted to, because they are orphans, so we are planning to have a shelter for them, and we are working on a legislation to see how people can foster them or adopt them, because some of them don't have parents anymore. So the program is ongoing to get them back to school. But some of them are in school already, and the government has taken it upon itself to ensure that the feeding, every other thing, even scholarship for them to where they think they can get to is ongoing. So we're working so hard, and World Bank has committed some fund. UNICEF also committed some fund, and my office developed the model school that they have, and we are almost completing the schools. In addition to that, other parts of the country are also having some schools. Like, for example, I got 5 schools per state, which we are developing from the office, but my office, 5 schools in each of the states, to ensure that the children go to school. What happened is that in the southern part of Nigeria, we have the children with the family that are not going to school. So it's very easy for them to quickly empower the parents and get them to school. But in the northern part, they are street children. So we must have shelter for them, and they look for parents to foster them. That one is ongoing. And I'm sure very soon we'll get out of that and they'll back to school. For the cause champions, they have access to us. Our website can receive information. Our website can receive information from the public. Aside from the cause champions, the public can report to us. And we also have the television station, 3 of them, the channels, the IIT, and NTA, to report to us abandoned schools, abandoned healthcare center, abandoned projects, lack of school. They report to us twice a week, which we have the sales officer to note. And when you collect that, we implement through the state or through the local government or directly from my office. So we have funds directly from my office that can attend to that. And we can even empower the state to do that. And of course, to say that not only the core champions, we have the celebrity also that we have made SDG ambassador who are all over the places that can talk to us. The civil society organization also talk to us. And the private sectors also adopt schools, adopt private PSC, private primary healthcare center. They furnish the schools, they buy medical equipment. Whatever they choose to do, they are doing it, and they're working fine with the government of Nigeria.
Thank you very much. Minister Fakhouri, your final thoughts, and perhaps you can touch on the Global Council on SDG 8.
Sure. Very quickly, I think what everyone is talking about in terms of the questions and the setup, and your question, Rami, about the progress. What is the real progress? And how is this all talk and no action on the ground? I want to talk about it from the concept of disruption, both positive and negative. First, let us be all very realistic. Countries who are members in the IDB are the largest hosts of forced displaced people or our neighboring conflict situation. If you think you can realistically proceed on your development plan without factoring in the massive disruption, I think we will be all naive sitting here and not really addressing this issue. And I want to recommend that IDB needs to add a special focus, as we did so well with the World Bank, on fragility and the effects of conflicts on the whole issue of sustainable development and achieving the SDGs, because many of the countries represented under IDB are very much probably the largest countries who are dealing with neighboring conflicts or forced displacement or refugees and so on. So for us, when you asked me the question, what's the progress for Jordan? I would assess it now in 2 years as a glass 2/3 full, 1/3 empty. We've done well on the institutional setup, the mainstreaming, the commitment, the political will, creating the partnerships, the working teams, and so on. We have also progressed very well on terms of focusing the agenda now on growth and employment, because SDG 8, I think for most of us, is going to be the hardest. The inclusive growth and the decent jobs is going to be the most challenging one that we all have to deal with, given everything we've been talking about. We have focused very hard on launching the most ambitious national human resource development strategy. The strategy for digital government and digital Jordan and e-government have been put in place. We have pushed on SDGs 17 specifically and 16 in terms of the biggest massive judicial reform program to focus on the rule of law issue, which is going to be very critical in terms of transparency, fighting corruption, and so on. These are not to be belittled because they take away massive resources that could be used more effectively in development and so on. And we're doing a massive political reform program of decentralization in Jordan to push this idea of localization and making sure that people at the local level are prioritizing their situations based on their specific needs and the different regions they come in. But key to that is going to be the financing for development agenda that Mahmoud had mentioned and we're all talking about. You need massive resources to achieve the the SDGs. And the government fiscal situations across all our countries is not in the best of shape, to say the least. Many of us are under either severe fiscal austerity, and we need to really maximize and use all financing schemes possible, from zakat to Islamic finance to development finance to maximizing private sector. Jordan is working very closely with the World Bank on the cascading approach in terms of mapping your capital expenditure budget to match the SDG priorities based on your country's situation, and then starting with the question, can this be done by the private sector or a PPP? And only leaving the limited public resources to fund the critical that remains that the private sector can't play a role in. Finally, I'll mention 2 points. Everything we've done sometimes plays around the edges. The issue of scaling up, the issue of leverage, the issue of the interconnectedness of the SDGs. I want to show everyone that. This is where you can unlock great potential and innovation and shortcuts if you understand in your own country's context how does this work well, and where you want to put the 20% investment that causes the 80% shift in terms of that. And finally, for all our countries, the most important cross-cutting theme is going to be women and youth. If we don't invest heavily in those cross-cutting pillars, I think we have the least chance of making the biggest transformations in all our economies.
Thank you very much. I think this is a good way to end the session, because we have to stop at 1. There is another session, by the way, on the finance for development, utilize it, in about 30 minutes. So if you are interested in the money, please come back in 30 minutes. Thank you very much for all of you who followed us on the web. This session was mainstreamed over the web. Thank you very much for the audience who've been with us. And thanks to all the panelists who really gave us their time and their collective wisdom. Dr. Mahmoud, please help me in thanking them. Thank you very much.